So I can go right ahead.
Yes, Miss KJ. Good night, Miss
All
Kaygianna.
right. Good night. Good night, Fisher Folk family. It's nice to be here
Good
with
night. Good
you
night.
again tonight. Nice to be in the presence of my comrades. So tonight, module 8, we're looking at the topic of administration and record keeping in Fisher Folk organizations. At some level at your organization, whether you're involved, I know most of us have served on the boards of the organizations and so on. There is a level of administration and record keeping that's important to keep the organizations going. So the objective of this module is to help us participants understand the importance of the administration function, good filing and record keeping for the organization, and to help us understand how an effective administration system will benefit the organization. So I will be your presenter tonight. My name is Kaygianna Toussaint-Charlery. I currently serve as the operations manager of the Goodwill Fishermen's Cooperative in St. Lucia, which is one of the 9 fisher folk cooperatives in St. Lucia. I also serve as the administrative assistant of the umbrella body, which is the St. Lucia Fisher Folk Cooperative Society Limited. Outside of my regular day job, I serve as a legislator in the upper house of the Parliament of St. Lucia. I have been employed with Goodwill for I think maybe about 15 years now. Yeah, so that in a nutshell, this is who your presenter for the night is. So we as we begin, we will try to seek to understand what is administration. We'll seek to define administration. We will look at a dictionary meaning of administration. And according to the dictionary, to administer is to govern. So to govern or to manage a public or private business. And in governing or managing the business, what you're seeking to do essentially is to make the best possible use of the resources available to you in order to achieve the goal of that business, the goal of your association, the goal of your cooperative, the goal of your FO. How do you use the resources? And we know that we exist in an environment where resources are constantly scarce, whether it is human resource, whether it is money, whether it is raw materials. Resources are almost always scarce. So the question is, how do you manage these resources in the best possible way to be able to achieve the goals and the objective of the organization? So there are many different aspects of administration. Generally it encompasses the operations of the organization. It is our usual way of organizing things to facilitate the running of the business. And the running of the business is obviously will be broken down into day-to-day operations, which your managerial and technical staff will have the responsibility to execute. And you also have the more long-term goals and objectives that the board of directors are usually, or the policymakers of the organization are usually responsible for. So administration ensures that there is unity of action, discipline, anticipation, forecasting, what needs to be done. So basically, it will answer the who, the how, the when, the whys. We know all the W's and the H. That is what administration will help us to understand and to respond to. In administration, you may have other functions such as a recruiting function, especially as things become more technical or as your organization grows, you may need more technical staff. You need to now have a transparent recruitment process. You need to be able to organize the resources, organize the day-to-day operations, organize the strategic functions or the functional areas of the business. You need to be able to direct the membership because our organizations are member-based organizations. Administration also ensures that there is a good working relationship between and amongst the parties or the stakeholders of the organization. And our stakeholders are basically the same across the board: our members, the policy makers, your staff, the Department of Fisheries. For organizations such as MyFO, which is a cooperative in its structure, we are also answerable to the Department of Cooperatives, and our cooperative officer and the registrar of cooperatives. So that's the government agency that's responsible for us. You also have to build relationships with the media, for example, because there are times you may have issues that you want to bring to the fore, and you may need to reach out to the media in order to bring them out in the open. So you need to build relationships, good relationships with these stakeholders, because you need to work in partnership with them. There is a great need for coordination of the efforts towards the overall goal, because what you do not want is a case where each stakeholder or each party or the different groupings of persons, so the members doing their own thing, the directors doing their own thing on the board, the supervisory committee doing their own thing, the department of cooperatives going the other way. No. In order for us to be able to achieve the goals in an efficient and effective manner, there needs to be a high level of coordination of effort in order to do so. And we need to be able to satisfy the needs of the members, because that is why the organizations came together in the first place, to satisfy a need, to fill a void. So the members have come together to pool their resources. And so we need to ensure that our administrative actions actually satisfy the needs of the members, and so on. So why do we need administration? So building on on the definition of administration, the question is, why do we need administration? Administration helps in the succession planning process. Many of our organizations have been, I know there are some relatively new and fledgling organizations, but a lot of our efforts have been along for a very long time. The effort that I work in have been in existence, I think, for 6 something years. The question is, how do they keep on going year after year? There has to be a level of succession planning. And administration will ensure that there is succession planning. And the other point feeds right into the first one. One of the ways to ensure that succession planning is successful is to ensure that there is good record keeping. So there is some level of organizational memory that exists long after particular personnel is gone. One of the failures of organizations, and it has, I have seen instances where it has created breakdowns in FOs that I have interacted with, is that the manager has all the knowledge and knows everything that's happening, or the president of the board is the only member of the board that knows what is going on, or the treasurer is the only one who knows the money matters that are happening in the organization. And if something were to happen to these people, whether they move on, whether they pass away, whether they dismember, whatever the case may be, then you find that we're running around and scrunting around like mad mice, trying to figure out what to do and how to deal with something, because there is no proper record of how something is supposed to be done. There is no operations manual. There is no institutional memory of how things have been done. And so it's difficult to continue. And so sometimes this causes breakdowns because there was no proper succession planning. Who takes up the mantle after this board is out, or members of the board have been replaced? Has the board put in a proper nominations committee, for example, to ensure that they've reached out to enough members to ensure that people can take up the mantle, and when you go to an AGM, that you're not getting a situation where you beg to nominate somebody and everybody declines because everybody feels they're not capable of taking on the job of directors or other members of the committee. Administration ensures that there is organizational documents are accounted for and not lost. That information about what is going on in the organization is easily accessible. For example, in our case, that we're governed by the Department of Cooperatives. So our cooperative officer makes regular inspection visits to the cooperative. When the inspector comes in, she will ask, for example, for minutes of the board meeting. If these things are not properly documented, if these things are not easily accessible, it means that you make the function of the regulator much, much more difficult. It makes reporting and adhering to legal obligations easier, and it aids in good governance. And that is something that last point that we have to ensure that there is good administration in our organizations, because we want to ensure that there is not just governance in our organizations, but that there is good governance in our organizations. There is transparency, there is accountability, there is communication in our organizations, and the administrative function is what will ensure that this happens. So we look at then what are the components of an administrative system. So you cannot have an administrative system that is just haphazard. It doesn't just happen overnight. There are particular components that will ensure that you have a good administrative system. And we'll just look at some of these components. We have policy and procedure development. And earlier on, I mentioned, for example, a policy handbook, whether it's a operations manual, whether it's an operations handbook, whether it's policies on particular aspects of the operation. There has to be policies, properly documented policies and procedures. And of course, as time goes along, there is a need to either update your policies and procedures or to develop new policies and procedures. One example is we just came out of that pandemic. So whereas you had an example where most boards, most directors, most organizations, they would meet physically within a physical space, to have meetings. But with the advent of COVID, it brought rise to a lot of virtual meetings. So the question is, were our organizations sufficiently prepared for that for that occurrence? And going forward, are there proper guidelines, proper procedures to guide these types of things? So you may have had a communication handbook, but now that you realize COVID happened, that forced us to go virtual, it can happen again. Any other eventuality can come up that will force us to do that. Have we updated our communications policy to guide the use of virtual platforms for our meetings? Another component is records inventory or record keeping, appraisals, retention, disposition, and these would guide some of these things, some of these functional areas of the organization. Inactive files management and control. And again, that looks at record keeping. How do you manage files? Is there what type of filing system do you have? Do you have an alphabetical filing system? Do you have an electronical filing system? Do you have a combination of the two? Are there policies to guide who files? What happens when somebody comes to retrieve a file? So for example, a member of the board may need a particular file. Does the member just come in and grab the file and go? Is there a book where they can, or an electronic system where they sign the file out like your library book and they sign it back in? What happens? How do you account for what goes in and what goes out? How do you account for example, a member who has called their shares? They've decided they no longer want to become a member. So you're not holding up a file for the person anymore as a member, but then it's part of your record because it's recorded as that person was a member, that person recalled their shares on a particular date, for example. How do you treat that inactive file? Management of active files, of course. How do you store the file? I mentioned that earlier. Reprographics, micrographics, digitalization. Have we moved in that era? Are we still in the pen and paper era? Are we still writing reports? Are we still dropping off physical files to directors or so on? How is that managed? Management of vital records, training and outreach program. So all of these are components of the administrative system. And again, like I said, if we want to ensure that we build strong organizations, we have to ensure that we get the administrative function properly. Because you may be into buying and selling, for example, your organization may be into retailing. But if you do not have proper records as to what are the fast moving items, what items remain there and become obsolete, you are really doing an injustice and a disservice to the funds of your members. And of course, we've mentioned record keeping a lot. So it clearly says that record keeping is an essential component of, of the administrative function. So we look at the question of why record keeping and member services. Without records, and that is a given, without records, a business cannot run efficiently. And I think I've explained why as I've gone along. A business will fail without records. What do you go to when you try to answer your why, your when, your how, your which, your why? You go to your records. That's where the answers are found. That is where the answers are found. And so you have to ensure that the records are done properly. A record of your members, a record of your assets, a record of your purchases, a record of your transactions, a record of, importantly, record of minutes of meetings, records of motions and resolutions. That is very important, so that you have something to go back to and refer to if you ever end up in a situation where a member, for example, or an external partner is calling you out for something or the other. You go back to the records, and it's the records that will save you. For example, you have an AGM at an AGM, it's, as the name suggests, is annual. Sometimes you may not have remembered, a member may not remember something that was said at the last annual general meeting. But what will help jog the memory, what will help us remember, is the minutes of that annual general meeting. What will help the members hold the board accountable? It's what we discussed at that meeting. What are the things we agreed to do by a particular time? Have we been able to achieve it? It's a way of even us internally assessing how much we have done, where we have been, have we achieved anything, are we progressing? The records will keep you in check. Okay? And in recording, of course, one of the things that is essential, as I said, in terms of recording, is reporting. Reporting. As we go along and we do things, we have to be able to report. We have a duty to report to the members. Next slide, Nadine. We have a duty to report to the members. We have a duty as the board to report internally. We need a report from the treasurer as to what is happening with our monies. So it means that your management team needs to present these reports on a, whether it's a weekly basis or a monthly basis, for the perusal of the board. And then the organization now needs to present it to the regulators in order that they know what is going on. When you meet your members, whether it's on a quarterly basis or whether it's at your annual general meeting, one of the features of these meetings are reporting. The members need to know what you've used their monies for within the last year. The members need to know whether you've made a surplus or a profit. The members need to know what you had been sitting there doing for a year since after they nominated you. Your records and your reporting to the members is quite important. So reporting helps you to improve your bottom line, because if you're getting your financial reports and you're realizing that you're constantly in the red, or you're not doing as well as you think you should be doing, when you look at the report, the financial report, you look at the management report, you look at your balance sheet, you look at your profit and loss, you may then be able to identify where your leakages are and be able to then take decisive action to correct your leakages and improve your bottom line. Reporting also helps to promote effective business practices. If you're reporting, if it becomes second nature to us, you are improving practices, best practices within the business. It promotes efficient use of resources. Again, record keeping and you reporting Now you can actually sit down and be able to get a bird's eye view as to what happened within the last month. And so that can help you determine, am I using the scarce resources of the FO to the best of my ability to achieve the goals? Now that will help you go back and look at your objectives, look at your day-to-day operations and determine where can I make the changes in order to become more efficient. It promotes compliance and cost saving in disclosure issues. So compliance, so for example, you're required to have a monthly meeting of the board, at least once a monthly meeting, and you're expected to keep records of that meeting. That's if you're doing it, it means you're in compliance. And again, there may be legal issues that may come up, and I mentioned that earlier at an annual general meeting or your policy documents. Your policy document will state that things are supposed to be done a particular way. A board member, for example, decides that he doesn't like this particular member, so he's going to deal with the matter differently. Or it may be out of sheer ignorance that they do not know what's the right thing to do because it's not properly documented. And then a member can take you to task for it. A member can take you to task. But if there is a properly documented policy, there is a properly documented procedure, then it means that it will save you some sort of cost and time as well in a legal battle. Okay, so I mentioned earlier in terms of record keeping, I mentioned different types of record keeping, I mentioned minutes, I mentioned financial records. And of course, in the record keeping, there are particular documents that you must have available. So when you look at, for example, on the financial side, for example, you would need to keep a fixed register and an inventory asset. You need to know what the FO owns. What are the things that, if anything happens, that can be translated quickly to cash for you to be able to pay something off? In order for you to get that right, you need what we call fixed asset registers. You need some level of inventory control, whether it is a manual or an automated inventory control, inventory management system. And we have a few, I think in St. Lucia, most of us use quick point of sale and QuickBooks. That's what most of us use in order to keep track of our inventory. You have vehicles. You need to be able to keep track of your vehicle documents, your license, your insurance documents, your roadworthiness documents. You need to be able to keep these things properly secured and at hand. Information on your members. Who are your members? How many members do you have? What numbers are assigned to your members? Which name is assigned to that member? If your member owns a vessel, for example, do you know the registration number of that vessel? And what I have found as a manager of the cooperative is that we've as time goes by, we've really augmented and added to the information we keep in the member files. So when I came into the organization more than a decade ago, I could not find members' files. Members did not have individual files. So there were pieces of document here and there that would tell you that a particular person is a member. So what I instituted since is that every member, I have a filing cabinet, and every member has their file with their name and the membership number on that file. In that file, you get the application form for the member. So it means that a lot of members who were there before my time, you could not find application forms for them. So you probably would find a member listing, but not an application form. So it means some of them I had to actually go back and redo their membership forms. So now you find every member has a file with their membership form, all of their information, their name, their address, their contact information, their beneficiary information in there. You would find a passport size photo of them in there. So you have a face to put to the name. And we've started adding, for example, when they renew the license for the vessels, we put in the license, the registration documents in there as well. Because sometimes you may get a call, for example, a member is in distress, and lo and behold, the member's family do not know the information for the vessel. They do not know the registration number for the vessel. They do not know the color for the vessel. But that information is pertinent for the search and rescue mission. And so sometimes my office is then able to make that information available because we've added these things to the members' files. Okay? We mentioned earlier one of the importance of record keeping, or one of the reasons why administration is important is because of succession planning. So we're going to now look at what is succession planning. So succession planning, and I did give a bit of an explanation when we looked at it above in the previous slide. Succession planning is a strategy for passing on leadership roles to an employee or group of employees. Okay, so it's a plan that you put in place. What happens if the manager is out? What happens when the manager is on leave? Is there somebody who can take on the mantle of the continuation of the day-to-day operations of the organization? What happens if the accountant has to proceed on maternity leave? Does the accounting function cease to function because the individual is out? What happens when somebody retires from a position? Do you have a structure in place to ensure that these leadership roles, these functions are passed on to another staff member so that the replacement can be done when that staff member goes out? And I mean, we often hear this little joke where they tell you, don't overwork yourself in organizations, because if you die whilst in the position, your family may get a reef at the funeral, but by the next few days, they'll be cleaning out your office and entering your replacement. The only organizations who can do it in a matter of a few days, insensitive as it may sound, is those who have proper succession planning, have done proper succession planning, so that the functions of the organization continue almost immediately without too much of a lapse. Okay, so succession planning helps you identify the right person for the job, and the administrative function will help the organization be able to do that. So a good administrator is deemed as the lifeblood of an organization. If you have a bad administrator, your bad administrator will just drive your organization down the drain. They will communicate badly, and that information, we know how bad the bad information travels, bad news travels quicker than the good news. You will not get new members because everybody will be afraid to come into your organization because your administrator is a bad administrator. A good administrator is central and critical to the success of the organization. A good administrator is an individual who has good operational and interpersonal skills. There must be a good mix of the two, because you may find a situation where the person is good at doing the documentation, doing the record keeping, um, doing all of these things behind the scene. But this same individual has bad interpersonal skills. They cannot speak to their staff. They cannot work within a business and a good. They cannot create a good business environment because they can't communicate properly. They can't work as a team. They're not team players, and that really throws off everything. So the combination of the two, good operational skills, but just as important is good interpersonal skills. Okay, so some examples of organizations that have really shown good the administrative function has been working very well is the Caribbean Network of Fisher Organizations, CNFO. And we must admit that individuals such as Nadine, because of her skills, we've really been able to function as a CNFO, because persons like these have really been able to bring people together. And look at CNFO operating not at just a country level, but an entire network of us from a spread of different islands. But however, we're able to sit down, we're able to communicate. Even, I mean, some of us, a lot of us don't even know each other physically. A lot of us have never met each other face to face. But because the administrative function has been able to keep the organization running properly, it has made it quite much easier for us to interface with each other, albeit a lot of the time remotely and using the technology. And another example that was cited there, and perhaps one of our representatives from Anguilla may be able to give us some greater insight on it when we get to the discussion aspect of it, the management of the Canary project in Anguilla. Okay. One of the things that is very important, and your administrator will really set the tone for something that is called organizational culture. Every organization has its own culture. Some are good and some are not good. An organization, if a bad organizational culture, is an organization really doomed for failure. But your administrator and your administrative function will really determine what the culture in your organization is. So organization culture is really how you do things in your organization. And your policies and your procedures are one of the things that will set the tone or the platform to really determine what your organization culture actually is. Okay? Who do you hire in your organization? Let's look at the recruitment function. Are you an organization with a culture that embraces diversity in your recruitment process? Or are you biased to a particular ethnic group, a particular sexual orientation, a particular political affiliation? That will set the tone for your organizational culture. How do you choose who will attend meetings? How do you choose who will attend meetings? Do you always send one individual on meetings? So, for example, some of us will be attending the World Forum of Fisher People. How did the administrators of CNFO decide who can attend? Were people cherry picked? Were people picked based on the service that they render to the CNFO? Were they picked because they were the friend of the administrator or the friend of the person who's doing the putting the list together? Was it based on merit? That will set the tone for the culture of your organization. What is the procedure for electing persons to the board? Is the process of election to the board fair and transparent? Are people superimposed on the board? Is there a process of transparent voting? How does that happen? That will determine whether people gravitate towards the organization. That will determine whether the members are comfortable with what is going on or not. All that is part of the organizational culture. How do we communicate? Are we an organization that is hell bent on formal communication vis-a-vis informal communication? Is there a combination of the two as the scenario or the specific item or the specific scenario calls for? Do we communicate with a lot of emails? Are we constantly sending 100 emails out a day? Are we using WhatsApp platforms? Are we more comfortably face to face? Which of it is effective? Is it effective? Communication sets the tone for your organizational culture. Is there a process for, say, for example, whistleblowers? Is there protection for a whistleblower? So a member on the board realizes that there is something sinister happening in the board, or a staff member realizes that one of the staff members are stealing or recording wrongly or something of that sort. Is there a culture and an environment that is conducive enough for that individual to be able to come to, whether it's the management, whether it is the cooperative officer, somebody, to say, you know what, I realize that this particular thing is happening. I probably want to investigate it further, or I have inconclusive evidence that this is happening. Do we have a culture in our organization that encourages that type of thing, to ensure that we're not running organizations where malfeasance and so on is happening unreported, because we have not created a culture and an environment conducive enough for people to be able to speak about these things? What is the decision-making process? So you have a board of 5 or 7 or 9. Is it that one person makes the decision and everybody just falls in line, or are decisions taken collectively? When a decision is made, even if you do not support it, do you understand as a board member that the decision of the collective binds you to the decision? How is that done? Or do you have is it a case of where I did not support this, I didn't vote for it, so I'm going to go out there and tell the members, well, the rest of them took that decision, but I did not support it, and you're out there fighting the very organization that you belong to. So in a nutshell, and what I want to leave with you is that the ultimate test of a good administrative system is whether the records are available to those who need them, when and where they are needed. That will determine whether you are effective. The manner in which they are made available looks at your efficiency. And a very famous writer in terms of business, who looks at business structures and so on, looks at that these two terms, effectiveness. Peter Drucker talks to us about effectiveness and efficiency, or effectivity and efficiency, and these two work hand in hand. And of course, if you look at the two I mentioned before, the W's and the H, the whens, the when, the what, the which, the why, the how, efficiency and effectiveness, and at what cost? At what cost? Are we being economical? And at the end of the year, have the decisions we taken been to the benefit of the members, that you can now give the members a return on their investment? Otherwise, all is lost. Otherwise, we are running organizations that are not meeting the need and the goals for which they came to be in the first place. Good administration builds strong organizations that are successful and that will remain active and relevant in time to come and way into the future. I thank you for your listening ear. I now open the floor to any questions, observations, clarifications from those who have heard me tonight.
Good night, Winsmore.
Good night, Winsmore.
Hi, Winsbird.
Very excellent
Very
presentation.
excellent
I think
presentation. I think that
as we go forward, last week we had a very good presentation, and I think all the topics has been covered by the members on these platform in these institute training has been excellent. Well, but listening the whole your presentation, I noted about 4 weaknesses I think we are so weak in terms of fishing cooperative in where you lay out where our strength could be. And I noticed you use the word record keeping a lot. I think in terms of record keeping, you know that we have strong cooperative and weak cooperative. This is my first point. That's about 3 points. And you have cooperative that is doing good business, and there's cooperative that are doing no business. And you have cooperative that have a space of operation, and they are cooperative with no space of operation. So I think in that presentation, I think this is where you don't have good administration and good transparency in terms of how the information move. So my thing is that I like to ask, how do the weaker ones, like the organization is not functioning in the way it's supposed to be functioning. It ain't doing no business. It ain't have no office space, and then sometimes they do have regular meetings in terms of keeping minutes. And this is where I find it collapsed the most of the organization. And how do we in the Fisher Folks organization bridge that gap moving forward? So that's my first point. And the other point I noticed, most of the organization, I noticed in St. Louis, they have a good structure where you keep photos and record keeping. So Fisher folks will go into these cooperative and have thing. And this is something I noticed most of the cooperative is not doing, because one of the things too is that the fishers themselves, I find, though be members of the cooperative, it just was no both owners being members of the cooperative, because in case you have to give dividends, rebating system, find that the system goes to the boat owners, so they don't really have time to be a part of the cooperative. So they are not members of the cooperative. So their information is not legit inside of the membership drive, the membership. So my thing, listening to your presentation, is that we in fishing cooperative have to now repull ourselves and see how we can advertise the role and the function and the benefit of the cooperative, because most people are asking these days, when I join a fishing cooperative, what in it for me as a fisher, different from the boat owners getting back his end of year, whatever he much gas he purchased, and then we ain't have this such good knowledge in some, because what we're trying to have now is that to have the fishers own the cooperative. In my final year, I know plenty people on the line. In my final wrapping up, is that from the cooperative department, more focused training cooperative and more capacity development structure, and not too much on the business side of things. And I think that is where we have a weakness now, because of management of the cooperative and keeping record of the cooperative and tracking down the manager of the cooperative if things are going bad, because we don't really have that skill set within the organization itself. So I go leave it as that, but I find into your presentation, I find the record keeping going to be so poor. And then if the organization in making money, all is strain go either be on 2 persons or 3 persons in terms of mobilizing the organization and mobilizing the fishers. That's my take on your presentation and how I see the weakness of cooperative around the region, including St. Vincent. Back to you.
Okay. Yeah. I am not sure if anybody. So let me just touch on some of the things that you mentioned. I think one of the things that we've been able to do in St. Lucia, and our system is not perfect. Let me say that from the onset. We have a long way to go still in terms of improving our administrative function. But one of the things we have been able to do is that, and I may have mentioned that in previous discussions, maybe that the managers of the organizations of the 9 fishermen's cooperatives, we have what is known as a managers forum. When the forum started, we would meet once a month. It changed at one time. We had a lull. When we restarted again, we started meeting every quarter. We have not really had a physical meeting, but we still have a WhatsApp group that I use a lot to share information with the managers. So what we've done is that we a lot of the times we don't reinvent the wheel in our administrative functions. So if I'm at Viewport and I'm having an issue with a particular thing, I call Denry, for example, and I ask, do you have a policy on X, Y, and Z? How do you deal with A, B, and C? So there is a lot of information sharing and the information of best practice that we do amongst ourselves, which really has helped all of us, all of us improve our administrative function. Because what we've recognized is that out of the 9 cooperatives, every operations supervisor, operations manager, or however you want the terms, the titles are, all of us come with a different skill set. And so what we do is that we use each other's skill sets as a team to be able to bring improvements to our individual cooperatives. So perhaps that is something you all can look at doing in St. Vincent Wins, but looking at not not each cooperative operating in a vacuum, but that you bring in the skill sets. One of the other things we've done, I remember a couple of years ago, when we had an issue with the St. Lucia Fish Marketing Corporation with payments and so on, non-payments and so on. We partnered with a credit union to be able to assist us with the payments. And in fact, when we signed that MOU, one of the things that we signed on was that we would have been able to, in the whole ethos for us, because we were cooperation amongst cooperatives, that the credit union, which is also a cooperative, would have assisted us in the accounting function. That never happened the way we envisaged it to happen. But these are some of the things that, recognizing that we had particular weaknesses, we tried to partner with some of these agencies who were better at us in these functions to be able to help us improve what we do. However, we should never think that we are too little or too weak, that's the word you mentioned, to be able to do the record keeping that we need to do. And the thing about it is, everybody's record keeping. When I take notes, and sometimes I sit at board meetings, I have more notes than the secretary of the board. I will tell you the truth. My notebook that I take my notes just when I sit at the meetings, I have more notes than the secretary of the board. When that was recognized a couple years ago on the particular board, I was then nominated as the recording secretary for the board, because I take very, very thorough notes. And sometimes these are some of the things that we need to recognize. The secretary that you're nominating, is it somebody who can actually be able to take your minutes? Because these minutes are legally binding documents of the decisions of the board, and they are what will bail you out or convict you in a court of law if anything comes up. So if you don't have somebody on your board who can do the proper recording keeping, you then have to ask yourself, it could be a staff member that you can bring in who may have the skill set to do it. And you may decide, okay, maybe you compensate the staff member a little extra, or you look at the working hours of the staff member. So if the staff member normally works from 8 to 4, but your board meeting is at 6 o'clock in the evening, on the day for the board meeting, give the staff the day off, or give the staff less hours so the staff can come to your meeting at 6 o'clock. But we have to ensure that we find mechanisms, and all of us, the mechanism will work differently based on the structure of our organization or our resource base, but we have to find ways to do it because it's important to be done. Anybody else want to chime in? Anybody else? Any observations, any comments, anything you'd like to add or say? Any clarifications?
Good evening, everyone. I'd just like to say that was a wonderful presentation, Kaygianna. I think that you captured everything that is needed, and you're so right. Any organization that has a good administrator is definitely going to go places. And I think that we should not let our fisherfolk organizations be any less than any other organization. It's really important to keep the records. It's really important that we, because that helps us to advocate as well in all aspects of what we do. We need to record our wins. We need to record our challenges as well, but we need to record our wins and let people know of our wins as well. So I just want to say, great presentation, and as I think it was Winsbert said, all of this year's CNFO Institute, I think we've taken it to a different level. I think because we've been doing it, and we've been seeing other people doing it. We're getting better at the presentations. So I think we can just get better from here. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you,
KG,
Suzanne.
KG, we also have another hand up because I know you may not
Yes, I
be.
see Mavis. I see Mavis's hand
Yeah.
up. Yes.
Okay, great. So
Thank you, Lucia.
you'll monitor the hands, KG.
I'm seeing them. Yes.
Okay, great, great.
So Mavis, you can go ahead, Mavis.
Good night. Yeah, in relation to succession planning, it's well, for every organization, succession planning is critical. But what you'd find mainly in the fisherfolk organization, you don't have a lot of people with the skill sets who know how to manage and carry on an organization. So what I think each organization should do when you recruit members is train persons. And if you find persons who are not trainable, or the majority of the persons organizing are not trainable, then nothing is wrong if they have enough resources to hire people from outside to manage it. Because sometimes, when you own something, you might not be able to see the bigger picture because you're looking at it from just what I want out of it. But if you have somebody who is trained and understand what is required to manage and to take your organization to a different level that you can benefit, as long as you have the resources, then that's one option of making sure you have a good administrator. But my main point is that each organization should train people so that you have resources to pull from when you need succession planning.
Thank you. That is so correct. And perhaps one of the things that some of us can look to, and my organization has not moved in that direction, but some of the other fisher cooperatives in St. Lucia have moved in that direction. So before they were purely fishermen's cooperatives, some of them have moved into fishers and consumers. So that has helped them increase their membership base. So for example, Labry is now Labry Fishers and Consumers. So for a few years ago, for example, they had a retired teacher on their board, because now these are the persons within the community who needs to use the services of the cooperative. For example, they have a fuel station. So apart from just the fishers, these individuals purchase fuel for their cars, for their or other reasons, and so they've seen the need to become members. But what that did for the organization itself is that it was able to open up the base. So the issue of limited or unskilled individuals who are members will make it difficult to be able to nominate a proper board. Or even when you have a proper board, you don't get a functioning board because most of the people do not have the proper skill set to do what they need to do on the board. Opening up the base may be one of the things that we can look to do in order to ensure that our members, the members that we're bringing in, have a wider array of skill set. Another thing I think we can employ is to bring in the family. So some of us, our members are fishers who may not necessarily have, even when you have some of them who have the skills, the training, the mindset to be able to do, but they're not interested in sitting on a committee. They're not interested in sitting on a board, or their interest is simply going out there to extract the fish. Their interest is simply about ensuring that at the end of the year that they have a return on their investment. But can we bring in the member's daughter who is a university graduate? Can we bring in the member's daughter who is a secondary school student who may be studying in a particular field, that we can now use that resource in order to improve the way we do things? We may not be able to, for example, bring them in as staff members, but we may have a particular project that we need to work on, and one of the members' children, that's their field of work. Can we ask the member, as a member, can we use your daughter's skills to be able to work on this project? So these are some of the things that we can employ to ensure that we address some of the issues of the issue of skill set, the issue of succession planning, And of course, we know that capacity building, in terms of capacity building training, is also a very important aspect of succession planning.
Okay, KG, can I just make one or two comments?
Definitely, Mitch.
Okay, so I first want all of you here to recognize that this activity is part of CNFO's succession planning strategy.
Yes.
So I want you to understand, but CNFO's succession planning strategy incorporates the possibility and the potential to totally envelop the succession planning strategy of each NFO. And therefore, if NFOs understand clearly what this particular activity is about, then they will encourage their membership to participate in this activity, because it then also adds to the capacity building initiative, the skill set development for leadership and succession. Yes? So I really want to make that point very clear, because I do not think that most of the countries' leadership are taking advantage of this activity as a succession planning strategy for the organization at the national level. Yes, it's a regional level initiative, but it really moves to the national level. So the importance of taking advantage of it, I want to underscore, so that persons leadership can understand you need to share this. It's free. I mean, the CNFO provides this at a cost to CNFO itself only. It's not funded by any particular mechanism. We actually use this to leverage funds as well to help the NFOs. So I wanted to make that point very clear, yes. And the other point I want to make is, in terms of fisher folk, we totally embrace the concept that the fisher folk or the fisher is not a one person issue. The fisher is a family issue. So we just looked at that probably 2 weeks ago or something in a discussion with, I'm not sure if it was with a potential donor or something, or somebody like that. But the very same discussion, well, it embraced more than just the children. It embraced the entire family structure. Yes?
Yeah.
Yeah, and then the other thing is, the CNFO actually practices that. I'm not sure if it was last year or the year before, but one of the years, one of the presenters for this same leadership training made the presentation with her daughter. They made a combination presentation, and the CNFO totally, encouraged that. So the concept of having fisherfolk defined as the family as opposed to just the person doing the physical fishing is extremely important across the board. So I want us to embrace that concept. Well, examine it first and then embrace it, because that's the reality. Small scale fishers are way of life centered, and way of life involves family. So that is important. Thanks, KG. Sorry for the length.
No, I think everything you said there was quite, quite timely, and I do agree that there are strategies that we can. I see your hand, Mavis. There are strategies that we can use to really help strengthen each other, and we need to recognize that we do not operate in a vacuum. And I think one of the beauteous things about our operations is that we have a network in the CNFO that works. It works. So as individual country FOs, we have this bigger environment, this bigger family that we can reach out to be able to strengthen the things within our particular FOs when there is a problem. And I'm not sure how much of that we use. I am not sure how much of that outreach we do. I do not know how much of the intervention we seek, but the whole idea in my mind of the network is to be able to reach out. And there are the platforms. I mean, Nadine manages the WhatsApp groups where all of us are there. And so if in one of our FOs or one of the countries we're having a particular issue, a lot of that we will find when we talk about it, that a lot of the issues that exist in one FO or on one island, it's almost the same in another island. And so that is one of the things that we have to ensure. It is called the network, Caribbean Network of Fisherfolk Organizations, for a reason. And we need to use the network in order to help improve our own individual situations. Yes, Mavis, go ahead.
Yeah, okay. So in reference to cooperatives, because we started talking about cooperatives and their functions and roles and how how you can improve. I think you may have to make some adjustment to the structure, because normally, I can be corrected if I'm wrong. Most of the members who are the cooperatives are people who are directly involved in some fishing activity. So if you're going to bring in family members who are not directly involved in either selling or catching or posting or what activity, then you might have to change the procedures or the rules of the bylaws, yeah, to incorporate these people in, because then you can't just, because of how the current bylaws are structured, you can't just take somebody who does not meet the standard of the bylaw to function. So then you might have to make some adjustments at your AGM or something to incorporate, all what you've just said.
Yeah, so you have the answer right there, that it may mean that you need to do a change in an amendment to your bylaw to include it. So for example, I think our bylaws says, the bylaws of organization says a fisher, but it also speaks to an individual with an interest in the fishing industry. So they may have different interests and so on. But yes, all it may require is that you go to your AGM with a motion to make an amendment to the bylaws to include persons other than fishers, if in fact you find that this will answer the question to opening up your base. Yeah. Susan, I see your hand.
Yeah, I
Go
just
ahead.
wanted to say that in Anguilla, one of the things that we did when we started, well, not me, because I wasn't there at the beginning, but one of the things that they did when they started was to have fishers, and then there was another section for fishers and their family. And one of the things that we did as part of the Canary project, which was about safety at sea, we did some first aid training and we did some water safety training. And because some of the days that we did, for instance, the first aid training was a good fishing day, what happened was that the fishers sent their partners or some other member of their family. So they got the training. But in essence, like what I think it was Mitch was saying, it's all part of the family, because they are the first, if a fisher has gone out, who's the first person who's going to tell you that they're missing?
Right,
It's going to be the
it's
family.
a family member.
Right. So I think that encompassing the family is the best thing to do. And what somebody was talking about, because I'm not a fisher, I'm the daughter of a fisher. My father has passed on. None of my sons are fishers as such, but I have given, because I know that I am here because of my dad, I am willing to give my talents that I have, which are not fishing, to the fisherfolk organization to make sure that they can get what is needed, because I think it's a noble profession and I think it needs to be viewed as such. It's a profession. It's a skilled profession, let me put it that way. And I think that our fishers need to get the recognition that is due to them in the region. Well, in the world, actually.
Yes. Thanks for that intervention. Winsbert, are we doing good for time, Nadine? Winsbert?
Yes, I just want to let's go back to the whole we mentioned about the record keeping, because this is something I have been saying, and I repeat myself, is that where do you have a strong cooperative running good business, and you have a cooperative do not have a space of operation, even keeping records. We even have in the region as well, to where you have some countries, even CNF, members of CNF does not have NFO. How do these organizations keep records in terms of voting rights, who select who, and who nominate who to attend meeting, and who sit on the committee? So, and the other thing I like to see is that what was promoting in St. Vincent and the Grenadines is that what we noticed is that most of the organization before had persons in the community who was not part of Fisher Folks. And I went on a drive when I got involved to get Fisher Folks not only to be a member of the cooperative, but to open their mind to sit on the administration of the board of director, to see how we could train these fishers to manage the organization, because persons quick to point fingers and other persons. So I think next year this is something we might have to look into in some of our organization. How do we get the fishers involved in being a part of the executive structure? Because most of the fishers say, well, being a part of the executive and you have meeting, you have to give up fishing time. There's no much benefit inside of for me. And so these are the things we really have to change the mindset of the fishers. And I would like to see within ourselves if we could lobby between each other in terms of supporting the weaker cooperative in them, because I see most of the cooperative in them who do not run business oriented, all of them have problems and all of them falling short. The record keeping is not at the best, and even for organizations looking to in terms of sending somebody to represent the organization, even in local meeting, we do have some problem there. So my thing listening you is, how do we train the non-organization to show the record, to keep the record in a positive way, so they could transfer it and have a better decision making going forward. That's my contribution.
Okay, if I can give an example, one of our cooperatives in St. Lucia, the East Coast Fishers and Consumers Cooperative, they've been in existence for a few years now, but they actually do not have a registered office. And they are not they do not have a business like a retail outlet. So whereas most of the other cooperatives, out of the 9, I think 7 of us have fuel stations, for example, and tackle shops, and 2 of them don't. However, even in the outside of not having a retail shop, there are other things, records that they must keep. So, for example, because the government pays a rebate on fuel consumed, and that is only paid to individuals who are members of a cooperative, the cooperative must keep these records. So the question then is, if the cooperative does not have a fuel station, how do they then keep a record of their members' fuel purchase? So these members purchase from other service stations within the communities, and then they have to